The morning sun pierced through the expansive windows of our luxurious penthouse, casting a harsh glare over the pristine kitchen. I stood at the sink, the sound of running water echoing through the silence as I washed the remnants of our breakfast. My phone vibrated sharply on the marble counter, demanding my attention. I glanced at the screen, and the words seared into my vision. Emma, I can't do this anymore. You're lazy, useless, and honestly a burden. I need a real partner, not someone who drags me down. I'm filing for divorce. Don't bother calling. It's over. I gripped the edge of the sink, my knuckles turning white as I reread the message. Useless, lazy burden. Each word was a dagger, but not in the way Daniel intended. I wasn't heartbroken. I was enraged. This was the culmination of months of simmering resentment, of Daniel's growing bitterness as I stepped back from my career to focus on my health. I dried my hands, my mind racing with a mix of fury and determination. Daniel thought he could dismiss me, underestimate me, and cast me aside. He had no idea who he was dealing with. I picked up my phone, my fingers hovering over the screen as I formulated my response. But I decided against it. He didn't deserve my words, not yet. As I finished the dishes, I couldn't help but reflect on the past year. I had built a tech empire from the ground up, pouring my heart and soul into every line of code, every business deal. But the relentless pressure had taken a toll, and I needed time to recover. Daniel saw this as weakness, a sign that I was giving up. He couldn't comprehend the strength it took to step back, to prioritize my well-being over the endless grind. Our marriage had been a charade for too long, a beautiful facade hiding the ugly truth. We lived in luxury, attended glamorous events, and smiled for the cameras. But behind closed doors, we were strangers, our conversations reduced to tense silences and bitter arguments. Daniel's message was the final straw, the catalyst that would set my plan in motion. The sound of the front door opening echoed through the apartment, and I braced myself for the confrontation. Daniel strode into the kitchen, his footsteps heavy with arrogance. He tossed his keys onto the counter, the clatter echoing through the room. His tie was loose, his shirt wrinkled, and his eyes held a cold, detached gaze. I assume you got my message, he said, his voice dripping with disdain. He leaned against the counter, crossing his arms as if daring me to challenge him. I turned to face him, my expression calm and composed, belying the storm raging within me. I did, I replied, my voice steady and unwavering. Daniel's eyes narrowed, clearly expecting a different reaction. He wanted tears, pleading, desperation. But I refused to give him the satisfaction. I held his gaze, my silence speaking volumes. "And," he demanded, his voice laced with impatience, "what do you have to say for yourself?" I exhaled slowly, my voice laced with a calmness that belied the storm brewing within me. "You made your choice, Daniel. What else is there to say?" He scoffed, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. Typical. Always so passive, so helpless. "You never had the guts to stand up for yourself, always letting me handle everything while you sat at home doing nothing." His words were meant to cut deep, to provoke a reaction. But I remained unmoved, my resolve unshaken. "You think you know me, Daniel? You think you have me all figured out, but you have no idea what I'm capable of." He laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that echoed through the kitchen. "Please enlighten me, Emma. What grand plans do you have? What secrets are you hiding?" I smiled, a slow, calculated smile that sent a shiver down his spine. "You'll see soon enough, Daniel. You'll see just how wrong you were about me." He shook his head in disbelief, a mocking laugh escaping his lips. "You're delusional, Emma. You think you can threaten me. You think you can scare me." I leaned in, my voice a low whisper filled with promise. "I don't need to threaten you, Daniel. I just need to watch as your world comes crashing down around you." He stared at me, his expression a mix of shock and disbelief. He had never seen this side of me, the side that was fierce, determined, and unyielding. He had underestimated me, and now he would pay the price. "You should get some rest, Daniel," I said, my voice laced with a false concern. "You have a big day at work tomorrow. And so do I." As he stormed out of the kitchen, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. The tables were turning, and Daniel was about to face the consequences of his actions. I finished tidying up the kitchen, my mind already focused on the tasks ahead. Tomorrow was a new day, a day where I would reclaim my power and identity, and Daniel would finally see me for who I truly was. By 9 a.m. the next morning, I was sitting in my executive office at Apex Innovations, the city skyline stretching out before me. The hum of activity outside my door was a stark contrast to the calm, collected demeanor I presented. I had been hands-off with the company for the past year, focusing on my recovery and planning my comeback. But now it was time for me to make my presence known, to show the world that I was a force to be reckoned with. As I reviewed the reports on my desk, my assistant Lila knocked softly on the door. Emma, the employee termination list is ready for your review, she said, handing me a folder. I took it from her, my eyes scanning the names until they landed on the one that mattered most: Daniel Thompson, department head, sales division. I pressed the intercom button, my voice steady and firm as I spoke. Send him in. The stage was set, and the curtains were about to rise on the most dramatic performance of my life. Daniel was about to walk into his own demise, and I was ready to watch it all unfold. The city sprawled beneath me as I sat in my executive office at Apex Innovations, the hum of activity a distant murmur compared to the storm brewing within these walls. The office was a bustling hive, but my presence commanded a different kind of attention today. Whispers echoed through the halls, speculation about my return swirling like a tempest. I had been away for a year, recuperating and strategizing, and now I was back, ready to reclaim what was mine. Lila, my ever-efficient assistant, stood before me, her eyes scanning a list as she spoke. Emma, the termination list is ready. Everything is in order. I took the folder from her, my fingers tracing the edges as I flipped it open. There it was, Daniel Thompson's name, stark and unyielding on the page. A sense of satisfaction washed over me as I realized the power I held in my hands. Thank you, Lila, I said, my voice steady and confident. Please send him in. She nodded and disappeared, leaving me to savor the moment. I leaned back in my chair, my heart pounding with anticipation. The intercom buzzed softly and Lila's voice filled the room. Daniel Thompson is here to see you. I pressed the button, my voice cool and composed. Send him in. The door swung open and Daniel strode in, his arrogance preceding him like a foul odor. He paused mid-step as he saw me, his expression flickering with confusion and disbelief. He had expected to meet with some faceless HR representative, not the wife he had so callously discarded. Emma? His voice was laced with uncertainty, a far cry from the confident tone he had used the day before. What are you doing here? I met his gaze, my eyes unwavering as I gestured to the chair across from me. Have a seat, Daniel. He hesitated for a moment, his pride warring with his curiosity. But ultimately, his need for answers won out, and he sank into the chair, his eyes never leaving mine. What is this, Emma? He demanded, his voice regaining some of its former arrogance. What are you doing in my office? I smiled, a slow, calculated smile that sent a shiver down his spine. Your office, Daniel? I think you're mistaken. This is my office. He scoffed, a harsh, bitter sound that echoed through the room. Don't be ridiculous, Emma. You don't even have a job. You've been sitting at home living off my paycheck for years. I tilted my head slightly, my voice laced with a quiet intensity. Your paycheck, Daniel? The one I sign every month. His eyes widened in shock, the realization dawning on him like a physical blow. You're lying, he spat, his voice trembling with anger. You can't possibly own this company. You don't have the experience, the knowledge. I cut him off, my voice sharp as a blade. I have more experience and knowledge than you can imagine, Daniel. I built this company from the ground up, and I've been running it from the shadows while you played at being a corporate climber. He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. I slid a folder across the desk, the sound of paper against wood echoing through the room. Here are the ownership documents, Daniel. Every department, every decision, all under my control. His fingers twitched as he reached for the folder, his eyes scanning the pages with a growing sense of dread. I watched as the color drained from his face, the reality of his situation sinking in like a stone. This can't be possible, he stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. You've owned this company the whole time? I nodded, a sense of satisfaction washing over me as I saw the fear in his eyes. Yes, Daniel, I let you believe whatever you wanted to believe. I let you think you were in control, that you were the powerful one. But now it's time for you to see the truth. He looked up at me, his expression a mix of shock and disbelief. But why? Why would you do this? I leaned forward, my voice a low growl filled with years of pent-up frustration. Because you underestimated me, Daniel. You thought I was weak, helpless, a burden. You thought you could control me, manipulate me, erase me. But I'm not the one who's disposable here. You are. He stared at me, his mouth agape, as I pulled another folder from my desk. I opened it, revealing his termination letter, the words stark and unyielding on the page. And that brings us to this, I said, my voice cold and unyielding. Your termination letter? He blinked, his eyes darting over the page as the reality of his situation sank in. You're firing me? he stammered, his voice trembling with disbelief. I nodded, a sense of satisfaction washing over me as I saw the fear in his eyes. Yes, Daniel, I'm firing you. He stared at me, his mouth agape, as the weight of my words settled over him like a shroud. But why? What reason could you possibly have for firing me? I arched an eyebrow, my voice laced with disdain. What reason? How about multiple complaints from employees about your toxic behavior? How about your failure to meet performance targets for the last 3 quarters? How about the inappropriate remarks you've made towards female colleagues? His face darkened with anger as I continued, my voice unyielding. And let's not forget your most recent transgression, your disrespectful behavior towards the company's owner. That alone is grounds for termination. He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. I could see the gears turning in his mind, the desperation clawing at his insides as he realized the gravity of his situation. You can't do this, he growled, his voice trembling with anger. I won't let you. I smiled, a slow, calculated smile that sent a shiver down his spine. You don't have a choice, Daniel. I own this company, and I make the rules, and I say you're fired. He stared at me, his eyes blazing with fury as I pressed the intercom button. Security, please escort Mr. Thompson out of the building. The door swung open, and 2 burly security guards entered the room, their expressions stern and unyielding. Daniel's face turned red with rage as he realized the futility of his situation. He stood up, his fists clenched at his sides, and stormed out of the office, the security guards hot on his heels. As the door slammed shut behind him, I leaned back in my chair, a sense of satisfaction washing over me. The first phase of my plan was complete, and Daniel's downfall was only just beginning. I had reclaimed my power, my identity, and my company, and now it was time to watch as his world crumbled around him. The echo of Daniel's footsteps faded as he was escorted out of the building, leaving a palpable tension in the air. I sat in my office, the cityscape sprawling before me, a stark contrast to the storm brewing within these walls. My phone buzzed with a message from Daniel, his words dripping with venom. You think you've won, Emma? This isn't over. I'll take half of everything in the divorce. You'll regret this. I smirked, setting my phone down without responding. He thought he could rattle me, but he had no idea what was dealing with. I had anticipated his every move, and I was ready for the battle ahead. My lawyer's name flashed on my phone screen, and I answered, her voice crisp and professional. Emma, I've reviewed the prenup. Everything is in order. Daniel has no legal standing to claim half of your assets. A sense of satisfaction washed over me as I replied, thank you. I expected as much, but it's good to have confirmation. As I ended the call, my assistant Leela knocked softly on the door before entering. Emma, there's someone here to see you. He says he has information about Daniel. I raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Send him in. A man entered my office, his eyes filled with a mix of determination and resentment. He introduced himself as Ben, a former employee who had worked under Daniel. I remembered him vaguely smart, hardworking, and mysteriously resigned despite being up for a promotion. Ben, what brings you here? I asked, gesturing for him to take a seat. He sat down, his jaw clenched and spoke. I used to work under Daniel. He sabotaged me, stole my project, and took credit for it. I have proof. I leaned forward, my interest peaked. What kind of proof? Ben pulled out a folder, his voice steady as he explained. Emails, screenshots, records of conversations. I kept everything, knowing that one day I might need to expose the truth. I took the folder from him, flipping through the pages as a sense of disgust washed over me. Daniel hadn't just been incompetent, he had actively destroyed other people's careers to prop up his own. And now he was going to pay for it. Thank you, Ben, I said, my voice filled with gratitude. This is exactly what I needed. He nodded, a sense of relief in his eyes. I'm glad I could help. Daniel deserves to face the consequences of his actions. As Ben left my office, I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. The pieces were falling into place, and Daniel's downfall was imminent. I picked up my phone and dialed HR, my voice steady as I spoke. I need you to launch an internal investigation into Daniel Thompson's department, focus on financial mismanagement and unauthorized budget allocations. I have reason to believe there's been significant misconduct. The HR director assured me that they would handle it immediately, and I hung up the phone, a sense of satisfaction washing over me. The wheels were in motion and there was no turning back. Hours later, I sat in my living room, a glass of wine in hand, as the front door slammed open. Daniel stormed in, his face a mask of fury and disbelief. What the hell is going on, Emma? He demanded, his voice shaking with rage. HR is investigating me, people are talking about fraud, and I can't even access my company email. I took a slow sip of my wine, my expression calm and composed. You mean the investigation into your misconduct, Daniel? The one that's going to expose all your dirty little secrets? He stared at me, his mouth agape. As the reality of his situation sank in, you did this, he growled. You set me up. I set my glass down, my voice steady as I replied, I didn't set you up. Daniel, you set yourself up. You just never thought anyone would call you out on it. He ran a hand through his hair, his confidence cracking as he realized the gravity of his situation. This isn't happening, he muttered, his voice trembling. This can't be happening. I stood up, my eyes locked onto his as I delivered the final blow. It's happening, Daniel, and it's only going to get worse from here. He stared at me, his expression a mix of shock and disbelief as my lawyer called. I picked up the phone, my voice smooth as silk as I spoke. Good timing, we were just discussing Daniel's future. Daniel's face paled as he listened to my one-sided conversation, the reality of his situation sinking in like a stone. He had underestimated me, and now he was paying the price. As I ended the call, I turned to him, my voice filled with a quiet intensity. You should have thought twice before underestimating me, Daniel. You should have known better than to think you could control me, manipulate me, erase me. But you didn't. And now you're going to face the consequences. He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water as the weight of my words settled over. He had no comeback, no retort, no way out. He was trapped, and he knew it. You think you've won, Emma, he growled, his voice trembling with rage. You think you can destroy me and get away with it? I smiled, a slow, calculated smile that sent a shiver down his spine. I don't think, Daniel. I know. And you're about to find out just how wrong you were about me. As he stormed out of the room, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. The tables had turned, and Daniel was finally getting a taste of his own medicine. I took a sip of my wine, savoring the moment as I prepared for the final act of my plan. The storm was far from over, and I was ready to weather whatever came my way. The morning light filtered through the windows, casting a soft glow over the living room as I sipped my coffee. My phone buzzed incessantly on the table, and I glanced down to see notifications flooding in. I ignored them at first, but when my assistant Lila's name flashed on the screen, I knew something was up. Emma, you need to check social media right now, Leela said, her voice breathless with urgency. Frowning, I opened my laptop and clicked onto the news. There was Daniel's viral post spreading like wildfire across multiple platforms. The headline screamed, "Betrayed by the woman I loved, the truth about my divorce." I scrolled through the post, my eyes narrowing as I read Daniel's twisted version of events. He painted himself as the victim, claiming that I had pretended to love him while secretly plotting to destroy his life. He accused me of humiliating him, firing him, and blacklisting him from his industry, leaving him with nothing. The post had already racked up thousands of shares and comments. Men rallied behind him, calling me a gold digger, a narcissist, a vindictive ex-wife who wanted to ruin a good man's life. But women saw through his lies. Hundreds of them were digging up the truth, exposing his manipulative tactics and toxic behavior. I scrolled through the responses, a sense of satisfaction washing over me as I saw the tide turning against Daniel. Someone had found his work record, detailing his numerous performance issues and complaints from staff. Another person had uncovered the HR statement about the fraud investigation. Former employees, co-workers, and even old friends started exposing him, sharing stories of his deceit and manipulation. Ben, the former employee Daniel had sabotaged, posted the emails proving that Daniel had stolen his project. A former female employee shared a story about how Daniel had made inappropriate remarks to her. Someone else leaked proof that Daniel had been using company funds for luxury expenses, hiding them under entertainment costs. His carefully crafted lie was crumbling before his eyes, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. The truth always finds a way to surface, and Daniel's time was up. At exactly 3:42 p.m., my phone rang and Daniel's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring, savoring the moment before he sent a text. Emma, we need to talk. Please. I smirked, my fingers hovering over the screen as I typed back a response. Oh, Daniel, you think you've won. Think again. I blocked his number, a sense of finality washing over me. He had tried to destroy me, but instead he had destroyed himself. As I was about to close my laptop, Lila called again, her voice laced with amusement. Emma, you're going to love this. What is it? I asked, intrigued. Daniel's job prospects are dead, she said, a hint of satisfaction in her voice. Every single company he's applied to has turned him down. I leaned back in my chair, a smile playing on my lips. Let me guess, bad references? Layla laughed. Worse, his social media stunt backfired. HR from multiple firms saw it and decided he's a liability. Nobody wants to touch him now. I let out a low whistle, impressed by the swiftness of his downfall. That was fast. He burned every bridge himself, Emma, Lila said. He's a pariah in his own industry now. I leaned back in my chair, satisfied with the outcome. Daniel had underestimated me, and now he was paying the price. He had tried to control me, manipulate me, erase me, but in the end, he only erased himself. The last I heard about Daniel was that he had moved back in with his parents. The man who had called me a lazy burden was now unemployed, living off his mother's generosity. The irony wasn't lost on me, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of poetic justice. 6 months after Daniel's downfall, my company had expanded, securing major partnerships and gaining media attention. I became a symbol of female empowerment, my story inspiring others to take control of their destinies. The press loved the narrative of a female CEO taking control of her life and her company, and I embraced the role wholeheartedly. One morning, as I sat in my office sipping coffee and reviewing reports, Lila knocked softly on the door before entering. Emma, there's something you need to see, she said, handing me a resume. I glanced down at the name and blinked in disbelief. Daniel Reynolds, he had applied for a mid-level sales position at one of our subsidiary companies, unaware of my involvement. I flipped through the document, noting the stripped-down credentials and the desperate attempt to start over.
I leaned back in my chair, tapping my nails against the desk as I considered my options. Tell the hiring manager to call him in for an interview, I said, a slow smile spreading across my face.
A week later, Daniel sat in a stiff chair in a boardroom, wearing a cheap suit, his shoulders slumped. He looked nothing like the man he had once been. No arrogance, no confidence, just defeat. He had no idea I was coming. He thought he was meeting a hiring manager, but instead I walked in, the color draining from his face as he saw me.
Daniel, what a surprise, I said, setting my folder down on the table. He stared at me, his mouth agape, as I flipped open his resume. I see you left your last job off here. Any particular reason? His jaw tensed and he swallowed hard, clearly searching for an excuse to leave. But he couldn't. He needed this job and he knew it. I just needed a fresh start, he stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, pretending to consider his words. A fresh start, and tell me, Daniel, why should we hire you? He exhaled sharply, his fingers twitching in his lap. I know the industry. I'm good at what I do. I need a second chance. I leaned forward, my voice steady and composed. A second chance, Daniel? Interesting. And tell me, how many second chances did you give the employees you sabotaged, the people whose careers you stepped on? He flinched, his eyes flickering with a mix of shame and regret. He had no response, no comeback, no way out. He was trapped, and he knew it. I stood up, my voice filled with a quiet intensity. You know, Daniel, I actually considered hiring you, just to watch you struggle under a boss you never respected. But then I realized something: you haven't earned it. He stared at me, his expression a mix of shock and disbelief as I picked up his resume and ripped it cleanly in half, letting the pieces flutter onto the desk. I wouldn't hire you for a janitorial position. Daniel, I said, my voice cold and unyielding. You're not worth the risk. As I walked to the door, I paused, turning to face him one last time. And Daniel, next time you call a woman a worthless burden, make sure she isn't the one signing your paychecks. With that, I walked out, leaving him sitting there, a broken man reaping what he had sown. Daniel never recovered. He bounced between dead-end jobs, unable to climb back up the ladder he had once ruled. Eventually, he moved out of state, trying to escape the reputation he had built for himself. Meanwhile, my company soared. We expanded internationally, making headlines as a powerhouse led by a woman who refused to be underestimated. One day during a major business gala, a journalist asked me, Emma, what's the secret to your success? I smiled, taking a sip of champagne as I replied, never let anyone tell you your worth, especially not a man who is threatened by it. The best revenge is building your own empire, better, stronger, and completely unapologetic. And that's exactly what I did. I built my empire from the ashes of my past, rising like a phoenix, unstoppable and unyielding. My story served as a testament to the power of resilience, determination, and the unbreakable spirit of a woman who refused to be defined by anyone but herself.